When did marriage stop being love and start being control? You see him pushing a cart with groceries he never chose. His shoulders sink. His eyes are vacant. His life is written in her handwriting. This was a lion. Now he rehearses apologies for yogurt. Machiavelli warned, once freedom is traded for comfort, a man becomes a servant. In this video, I'll expose the hidden machinery that turns men into donkeys and show you how to break free in silence. If you've ever shrunk yourself just to keep peace, this is your wake-up call. Stay until the end. We are Simplify Success. 1. The pattern of transformation. The moment a man believes love will protect his freedom is the moment he begins to lose it. You can see it in the smallest details. The spark that once made him unpredictable turns into routines that feel safe but hollow. What looks like maturity on the outside is often just the quiet death of his independence. Take Daniel, 34, an engineer living in Denver. At work, he's known as decisive, a problem solver who doesn't hesitate when millions of dollars are at stake. Yet at home, the same man freezes when his wife asks a simple question, "Where do you want to eat tonight?" He stutters, hesitates, and finally answers, "Wherever you'd like." It seems polite, even loving, but it isn't love speaking. It's fear. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of disapproval. Fear that his voice no longer carries weight in his own life. You didn't begin that way. In the early years, Daniel still made bold moves, planning spontaneous road trips, surprising her with weekend adventures, making decisions that showed confidence. But slowly, compromise became surrender. Each small concession seemed harmless, even virtuous. Skip the poker night, she'll be happier. Quit the gym, there's too much housework. Agree with her opinion, why start an argument? None of these choices looked like chains on their own. But link by link, a prison was built. One evening, after a long day, Daniel found himself standing in the grocery store holding a carton of milk. She had texted him, "Don't forget the almond kind, unsweetened." He stared at the shelves, paralyzed because the store carried 3 different brands. In that frozen moment, he wasn't the man who once managed million-dollar projects. He was a boy, afraid of getting scolded for buying the wrong milk. The realization cut him deeper than her words ever could. He thought loyalty was love. She thought loyalty was leverage. When was the last time she cut you off mid-sentence and your words just died in your throat? Be honest. I'll show you the move that flips the script. Type a few words in the comments now. Machiavelli's warning echoes here. Once a man ties his power to approval, he no longer rules himself. What looks like cooperation is often rebranded submission. In the theater of relationships, the lion who forgets his claws is rewritten as a mule, useful, obedient, replaceable. And what comes next isn't just noise, it's the machinery that makes men believe they're equal partners while they are slowly being absorbed. He thought emotional compliance was intimacy. She saw it as surrender, and surrender always kills desire. So pause and imagine this. Tonight, when the small test comes, where to eat, what to buy, how to spend your weekend, don't answer immediately. Don't explain yourself. Let silence hang for a second. You'll notice her eyes shift, not out of anger, but out of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the seed of respect. Because the moment you stop rushing to please, you stop being predictable. And the moment you stop being predictable, you stop being controlled. But the story doesn't end with politeness turned into fear. Up next is the seduction that makes men volunteer for their own cage. The promise of partnership that feels equal, until you realize it was a takeover in disguise. 2. The seductive promise of partnership. The cruelest illusion is not betrayal. It is believing you are equal in a game that was designed for you to carry the weight. That is how men walk into a cage smiling, convinced they are free. Mark, 36, a project manager in Dallas, used to call himself lucky. His wife often reminded friends how he was her rock, the dependable one who always had a plan. At first, he wore that title like a badge of honor. He thought it meant respect. Until one night, sitting at a dinner party, he realized something. Every story she told about their life together framed him not as a partner, but as a resource. Mark works so hard so we can live in this neighborhood. Mark's job pays for the kids' private school. Mark handles the bills so I can focus on the important stuff. Guess smiled. She beamed, and he felt the knife twist, because the important stuff never included him. It didn't start as cruelty. It began with small phrases that seemed harmless. You're better with numbers. Why don't you handle the budget? I'll make the social plans. You don't like texting people anyway. You pick up extra hours. I'll take care of the rest. Each request framed as logic, each concession framed as teamwork. He thought compromise was proof of maturity. She saw compromise as territory gain. And by the time he noticed, the map of their life had been redrawn. His role was simple: provide. Her role was everything else. He had become the labor powering a vision he did not design. The punchline was bitter. He thought loyalty was love. She thought loyalty was leverage. The next time she tests you with silence, will you rush to fill it or hold it until she breaks first? If you dare, say it, and I'll show you how to turn silence into power. Just one word in the comments is enough. Machiavelli would not be surprised. In The Prince, he warned that alliances are rarely equal. They are takeovers disguised as friendships. A merger on paper looks balanced, but in reality one side absorbs, the other is absorbed. Love sells itself as two bodies moving as one. In truth, it is often one voice calling the shots and another voice silenced under the weight of obligation. It is the theater of equality, where the mask of partnership hides the architecture of control. And what comes next isn't noise, it is the tightening rope of dependency, the way finances become shackles dressed as responsibility. He gave his energy believing it was investment. She treated it as entitlement, and entitlement never stops asking. So test this tonight. When she asks for the little favor that sounds reasonable, pause, ask yourself, is this a choice, or is this the next brick in a wall I will not escape? Do not rush to nod, do not rush to agree. Let the silence linger, let the air thicken. You will notice her reaction is not gratitude. It is the discomfort of someone who suddenly cannot predict you. That discomfort is your first proof of leverage. Because the one who always agrees is never respected, and the one who withholds agreement becomes the only one worth negotiating with. Skip what comes next, and you will keep believing the script that love equals equality. Stay, and you will see how the sweetest promises are just the bait for the cage. How financial dependency becomes the chain you never thought you put on yourself. 3. Financial dependency as control. The most dangerous chain is not the one locked on your wrist. It is the one you wear proudly because you believe it means security. That is how financial control hides itself, disguised as responsibility, wrapped in the language of love. Ethan, 41, a sales manager in Phoenix, thought he had built the perfect life. A good job, a comfortable home, a wife who praised his hard work. The conversations always sounded noble. We need to save for the children's future. We should be smart with money. It's our account, our decisions. Each phrase calmed him. Each phrase made him nod. Until one evening he wanted to buy a new guitar, a passion he had since college. He mentioned it casually at dinner. She looked up, paused, and said, "Is that really the best use of our money right now?" The words seemed soft, but the look in her eyes told him everything. In that moment, Ethan realized the truth. It was never their money, it was her approval that decided. His income was the river, her hand was the dam. At first, the concessions looked harmless. He gave her the budget because she was better with numbers. He let her plan vacations because she was more organized. But slowly, the map of power shifted. Our money became her budget. Our home became her project. Our future became her script. And he became the engine fueling choices he never made. The illusion of partnership had transformed into the reality of management. He was not a husband anymore. He was an employee who received praise when he performed and silence when he didn't. He thought maturity meant sacrifice. She thought sacrifice meant control. How many times did you chase her approval right after she dismissed you? Stop lying to yourself. I'll tell you why power died there. Write a few words in the comments if you've lived it. Machiavelli warned that dependency is the true currency of power. Princes in history never chained their subjects with swords alone. They used land, food, and debt. The one who holds the purse controls the battlefield. Modern marriage perfects this art. Joint accounts become invisible handcuffs. Shared mortgages become fortresses where escape feels impossible. Combined credit becomes a leash that tightens with every purchase. It looks like love. It feels like teamwork. In reality, it is a contract that one side writes and the other side pays for. What comes next is not noise. It is the way a man's labor transforms into fuel for someone else's dream, while his own desires starve. He worked longer hours to prove himself, she raised the standards to keep him working, and the cycle repeated until exhaustion became normal. So test this. When you get paid, take 1% and keep it in silence. Not as rebellion, but as proof you still exist. That small act will feel heavier than any purchase. It is the seed of independence that tells you your life is not entirely rented out. You'll notice a shift, not in her words, but in your eyes when you finally look at yourself in the mirror. Because the man who funds everything but controls nothing is not a partner. He is a servant in his own castle. And yet, the prison of money is only the first wall. The next wall is more invisible, more suffocating. It is the slow erasure of friendships, the careful cutting of every rope that once connected you to your old life. Skip the next part, and you'll never see how isolation is engineered as the perfect weapon of control. 4. Social isolation tactics. The slowest death is not losing money. It is losing the people who once reminded you of who you were. That is how isolation works. Not as punishment, but as persuasion that convinces a man to cut his own rope. Consider Anthony, 38, a firefighter in Boston. His life had always been defined by his crew. Weekly poker nights, long runs at dawn, shared beers after grueling shifts. Those friendships carried him through danger and loss. Yet after marriage, the rhythm shifted. At first, it was subtle. His wife would say, "Do you really need another late night with them? You should rest." Or, "We could use that time together." Each remark sounded reasonable, even loving. He agreed, thinking compromise was maturity. Until the night his best friend called to share news about becoming a father. Anthony declined the invite to celebrate because his wife had planned a home project. On the phone, his friend laughed lightly and said, "Man, you're already gone." The words landed like a knife. He had not noticed the disappearance of his old life until someone else pointed it out. He thought devotion was love. She thought devotion was control. The brilliance of isolation is that it wears the mask of care. Wouldn't you rather spend Friday with me? Your buddies still act like kids. Do you think they are really good influences? These questions are not demands, they are levers. Each one positions male friendship as childish, reckless, unnecessary. Each one reframes loyalty to friends as disloyalty to the marriage. Over time, the man accepts a false choice: be a husband or be a friend. And when he chooses husband every time, he does not realize he is also choosing solitude. When did you last answer too fast just to escape the tension? If you dare to admit it, I'll give you the way to keep control. One word in the comments is enough. Type it now. Machiavelli warned that the prince never fears a strong enemy as much as he fears strong alliances. Alliances make men dangerous because they give them perspective. They remind them of their value outside the court. The most efficient way to control someone is to strip them of their independent network. Once he is alone, the crown becomes his only world. Once he is cut from his friends, his wife becomes his only mirror. A man who has no allies has no escape. What comes next is not noise. It is the silence of the phone that no longer rings, the group chat that no longer includes him, the gatherings that go on without him. That silence convinces him resistance is pointless. He gave his time believing it was love. She received his absence as victory, and victory always demands more. So tonight, when the invitation comes, the simple beer after work, the quick hike on Saturday morning, say yes without permission, not as rebellion, but as proof you still exist outside the walls. Watch how quickly the test appears. The sigh, the subtle frown, the phrase, "I thought we had plans." That reaction is not about care, it is about control, and the discomfort you feel in that moment is not weakness, it is the signal that you are reclaiming ground. Because a man who abandons his circle abandons himself, and a man who abandons himself becomes easier to break than to love. Yet isolation is only one side of the blade. The next cut is sharper, quieter. It comes in the form of constant correction, the drip of criticism disguised as concern, the endless reminder that who you are is never enough. Miss the next part and you will never see how words that sound helpful can turn into chains heavier than iron. 5. Constant criticism and external control. The sharpest prison is not made of walls. It is made of words that convince a man that he is never enough. That is how control grows stronger, not by shouting, but by whispering corrections until he doubts his own breath. Take Robert, 39, a school principal in Chicago. Leadership was his identity. He made decisions quickly, stood firm in conflict, carried himself with quiet confidence. But at home, that confidence dissolved. His wife rarely argued directly. Instead, she sprinkled small remarks through their days. Maybe wear a nicer shirt. You should eat healthier. Why don't you try being more ambitious? Each comment sounded caring, but stacked together, they carved him into someone else's design. One night, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he caught his own eyes and realized he no longer recognized the man staring back. He thought improvement was love. She thought improvement was control. The process had been slow. First, the poker nights became rare. Then, the hiking group disappeared under home projects. The spontaneous drinks with colleagues turned into carefully scheduled couple time. Each lost connection erased a piece of his old identity. With no friends left to remind him of who he was before, Robert had no point of reference. His reality became hers. His sense of self shrank until the only validation left came from the very person reshaping him. If you could send one message to the man you were before she broke you down, what would you write? Be ruthless. I'll rewrite it in Machiavelli's voice. Just one short line in the comments. Machiavelli warned that power does not always arrive with force. The most effective rulers correct instead of command, reshape instead of restrain. It is the art of wearing down resistance until submission feels voluntary. Criticism, disguised as concern, is the mask that turns love into control. When repeated long enough, it rewrites a man's inner script. He begins to believe that his natural state is failure and that only her guidance makes him acceptable. And what comes next isn't noise. It is the invisible shift where he stops trusting his own judgment and starts asking permission for even the smallest choices. He gave his silence thinking it kept peace. She received his silence as surrender, and surrender always invites more demands. So test this in the next correction. When the phrase comes, "You should dress better," or "You need to eat healthier," do not defend yourself, do not explain. Simply nod once, then continue as you planned. That single act will feel heavier than 1,000 arguments, because it is not about the shirt or the food. It is about proving to yourself that you can act without needing a stamp of approval. You will notice something subtle. The correction loses its grip when you no longer treat it as because the man who cannot move without approval is already erased, and the man who begins to act without it is already reclaiming his ground. Yet criticism is not the final stage. Once words reshape your choices, the next step cuts deeper. It is the quiet elimination of joy itself, the way passions, hobbies, and the very spark that made you feel alive are slowly labeled as waste. Skip the next part, and you will never see how identity itself is dismantled piece by piece until nothing remains but utility. 6. Erosion of identity and autonomy. The most dangerous theft is not money or freedom. It is the quiet theft of self, when a man wakes up and no longer recognizes the face in his own mirror. That is how erosion works. It does not strike with violence. It dissolves piece by piece until nothing remains but the version others demanded. Consider Michael, 42, an architect in Seattle. He had once been known for his passion projects, sketching designs late into the night, playing guitar at open mic events, reading philosophy that gave him fire. These activities did not pay bills, they fed his soul. Over time, the criticism arrived in soft disguises. "I just want you to be your best self. I'm helping you focus on what matters." The words felt like care, but the effect was corrosion. He sold his guitar to save space. He stopped sketching to spend more time together. He put away books because reading alone is antisocial. One evening, staring at a blank desk where his drawings used to be, he realized his life had been reduced to projects that did not belong to him. He thought sacrifice was love. She thought sacrifice was control. The brilliance of this system lies in its deniability. When he protested, she called it concern. When he resisted, she said it was for his good. He found himself defending his right to simply exist as he was while drowning in guilt for resisting her script. That endless correction created what psychologists call an external locus of control. Instead of trusting his own judgment, he began to seek approval for the smallest decision: what to wear, what to eat, what to do on Sunday morning. His mind became outsourced. This week, what limit will you set that she cannot cross? Say it, and I'll show you how to defend it. One word in the comments is all it takes to begin. Machiavelli warned that rulers rarely destroy identity with force, they destroy it with logic, the logic of utility. Does this activity produce income? Does it improve the home? Does it raise social status? If not, it is declared waste. The ruler does not forbid joy. The ruler convinces you to abandon it yourself. It is the mask of reason hiding the knife of control. And what comes next is not noise. It is the emptiness of weekends that once gave meaning, now replaced with chores that feed the household, but never the soul. He gave up passions thinking it was maturity. She received his emptiness as obedience, and obedience always asks for more. So tonight, test this. Take 30 minutes for the one thing that once made you feel alive. Do it without permission, do it without explanation. That small act will feel heavier than a grand rebellion because it proves you still exist beyond utility. And when you do, you will notice something unsettling. Not her disapproval, but her confusion. Because confusion is what happens when control no longer works. Because the man who abandons joy abandons himself, and the man who abandons himself becomes the easiest tool to shape. This erosion is the final blow. When joy is stripped and identity is rewritten, a man no longer needs chains. He becomes his own jailer. And that is why the conclusion matters. Because only by seeing the entire machinery at once can you break it. Miss the ending and you will keep living the script without ever realizing it was written for you. This is where everything comes full circle. What you've seen wasn't about marriage as paperwork or about tricks for winning arguments. It was about exposing the hidden machinery that quietly breaks men down. Dependency that looks like responsibility. Isolation that looks like care. Criticism that sounds like love. You've seen how compromise becomes surrender, how devotion becomes control, and how a lion can be rewritten into a mule when he forgets his claws. But this isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming untouchable. It's about learning that presence without self-respect is surrender, and surrender always kills desire. You don't need to beg to be valued, you don't need to over-explain to be heard. You need only to reclaim silence, limits, and the right to live as yourself. Just last month, a man named David, 35, a lawyer from Toronto, sent us his story. For years, he thought being endlessly available would buy him peace. Instead, he found himself drained, criticized, and ignored. After watching these strategies, he chose one small change. No more rushing to answer, no more automatic yes. Within weeks, his wife looked at him differently, not as her assistant, but as a man with gravity. David told us, "The moment I stopped explaining myself was the moment I started being respected again." You could be next. Subscribe now, because the shift starts quietly, but it changes everything.